Hey there, Eorzea. It's me, MTG Rat Girl. Are you looking forward to the new Final Fantasy set? Is this the only Universes Beyond that you find permissible at all? Is this a perfect overlap of your hyperfixations that is enough to turn you into a whale for WotC immediately? Well then, this video probably isn't for you. Sorry. I'm the gayest person I know to never complete a Final Fantasy game at all, so I'm probably not the best person to be talking on the subject. As for you other Commander players who will pick up 1 or 2 singles to make the best use of your overflowing box of bulk rares, this video is for you. I love drafting. This channel is about Commander, but I really think that Limited is the truest way to play this game. Nothing beats an FNM at the game shop or cracking packs on your living room floor with your closest friends. Luck doesn't care about how many games you've played before, and learning how to draft is a great introduction to deck building for new players. Unfortunately, this hobby leaves me with a lot of these guys. Bulk rares, just a lot of them. Not, maybe that one's more useful, but you get the idea. When I come across a 6 to 8 drop in a draft, my brain lights up. I am a Timmy player after all, so no matter which colors I find myself in, I'm always looking for that big splashy top end to finish out those grindy matches in as much style as I can manage. Then I go to sell the ones that I don't need, and Cardsphere users are like, I'll take that 140-cent card and nothing else in your collection, and by the way, could you also pay $5 to ship it across 3 oceans? And you'll have to triple sleeve it too and secure it with frog tape. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to dispute it because the guy on the donkey who carries the mail to my farm in Adelaide isn't always very careful with letters. And the game store doesn't want them either because there's like 10 sets a year now, so it doesn't matter how rare your pull was. It's less worth the price of a play booster every time a new set comes out. The house always wins, baby. They got me again. Ding, 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 ding. If you also have a bunch of bulk 6 drops that don't have a home, Emet Selch might have the perfect spot for them. The oft-forgotten bulk box of the in-game zones, your graveyard. Emet Selch is a 2-faced card, very cute and appropriate for a villain, I might add, and so our game plan also comes in 2 phases. 1, mill as much of your graveyard as you can, and 2, cast reanimation spells from your graveyard. He's also apparently really gay and swishy, according to my friends, but I've never really played Final Fantasy XIV, the critically acclaimed RPG, at least past the free trial where you can play all the way through A Realm Reborn and the award-winning Heavensward expansion. But he does like this thing with his wrist every time he's on screen. And also, he's just like really giving it to me with this frilly skirt with the fur and the shoulder tassels. So that's really all I ask for in an evil role model. Many of you will already be familiar with this self-mill strategy. Sidisi, Grist, and my very own Nashi Searcher in the Dark list all have very similar game plans. They all have one problem in common though. Sometimes you mill the wrong card. Reanimators. Has this ever happened to you? You find an option to discard or mill the perfect creature into your graveyard. You can't wait to find that reanimate spell to bring it back to the battlefield right where it belongs. Uh-oh, looks like the wrong card was on top of your deck, Grist. Who knows when you're gonna get that card back? Well, worry no more. No need for an Eternal Witness or expensive cards like Yawgmoth's Will. Just play Emet Selch. All the convenience of an Underworld breach without the price tag, or those pesky turn limits. With Emet Selch, you'll always have that effect as an 8th card in your hand, and only when you need it. With new DFC action, this gay wizard starts as a discard outlet and flips over to make sure you can cast those cards right when you need them. Now that's what I call versatile. Now you can mill as you please and get that 6 mana card for the price of just 2 mana every time. Say goodbye to taking up precious card slots to reanimate your instants, sorceries, and enchantments. Focus on the necromancy that matters with Emet Selch today. Card price to be determined. MTG Rat Girl assumes no responsibility for cards in graveyards being exiled or shuffled into the library. No actual gameplay footage shown. Taxes and stacks effects may apply. Sorry about the ad break, everyone. They really need to warn me about that. So, What Emet Selch does on the front half is mill. This deck has all the mill cards you'd expect. Glimpse the Unthinkable, Drown in Dreams, and Cemetery Tampering are good for steadily chunking your library down into your graveyard. However, this is secretly a deck that wins with combat damage. So we've also got Screaming Swarm to make sure that you're milling yourself every time you attack, so you can see the fruits of your grim labor even sooner. Fleet Swallower is also a good reanimation target and a huge mill spell wrapped up into one. The Ancient One is another mill engine that takes advantage of the weird camel-shaped mana curve that we have. By activating that ability, not only do you get your biggest body where it can easily be reanimated, but you also mill an additional 5 to 7 cards on top of that. Reanimates. This category is the main part of our game plan, and it's honestly a shame that it can't be even bigger. Effects like Persist, Victimize, and the archetype's namesake, Reanimate, are all incredible. Casting a 6-drop for 2 mana and a -1 counter will be worth it every single time. I love doing it. It really warms the cockles of my heart. Cass put the Dr. Eggman clip there.
It warms the cockles of my heart. I know the feeling, sir.
If you're going over the deck list, though, you might notice that Unearth seems pretty out of place here. I still run it because it gets back the most important card in our deck, the Commander. Sometimes you run into games where you are unavoidably the heel at the table, and you have to be true to Emet Selch's story by effortlessly reappearing again and again. Commander tax be damned.
You fiends are overfond of your own voices.
Such a waste of time and energy, both yours and mine.
Another odd spell for us is Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. It is expensive, but it's a reanimate and a murder at the same time. It also lets you take something from any graveyard, not just your own, in case somebody else happens to get something big and juicy in their grave before you do. The last two worth talking about are Doomed Necromancer and Obsessive Stitcher. They're both more expensive than you'd like for a reanimation effect, but they each have a body that can be pulled back with an effect like Breach the Multiverse or Unearth. Obsessive Stitcher also helps you discard more of your big demons and whales earlier in the game, which is well worth setting up a slightly more expensive reanimate later on. Win cons! Okay, so we are going to be able to cast reanimation spells and get a couple big creatures at a steep discount. While this feels amazing every time it happens, there are only so many cards that let us do this, so you can't always do it every single turn to push your advantage. Lucky for us, there are plenty of nasty ways to pump the creatures that we do have to finish out the game with raw combat damage. WWE raw combat damage. Late in the game, Candlekeep Inspiration is a powerful Alpha Strike enabler. As long as you're milling enough to stay in the game, you're sure to have enough instants and sorceries to make this feel like a blue Craterhoof. Since it also counts cards in exile, it doesn't even care about the backside of our commander exiling our graveyard to double up on those draw and mill effects as much as possible. If you draw this after someone exiles your graveyard with a Soul Guide Lantern or a Bojuka Bog, then no worries. You can still punch your way to victory, like every Timmy wants to. Another card that can amplify your threats is Runechanter's Pike. The backside of our commander has flying and a beefy 6 power all on its own, so drawing this in the mid to late game should make him a lethal attacker, even if the table is managing to keep your recursive graveyard of monsters in check. When all of your evil wizard plans fail, you can always use the most powerful spell of all. Gun. Finally, one of my all-time favorite ways to win is with Sir Conrad the Grim into a massive mill spell. If you manage to reanimate him and then cast Cut Your Losses or attack with Fleet Swallower, you should be able to easily pin everyone for 10 damage. Pair this with a Tainted Strike for just 1 additional black mana, and that is a guaranteed game over. This deck also tends to, mill your whole library, and need a way to win on the spot that isn't combat-based and doesn't cause you to lose the game by drawing or milling yourself out. For this, we have exactly one line, which is all you need when your entire library is in your graveyard and your commander is flipped over. Here's how it goes. We have a list of 5 lands that produce 2 mana instead of just 1. If you can reanimate or cast Navigator and Cloud of Fairies while one of these are on the board, then Navigator can choose to soul bond to your fairies. Tap one of the double lands and an island to produce at least 1 blue and 2 mana of any color. Use 1 and a blue mana to activate your fairy's new ability to blink them, and when they return, you untap both lands that you used for the activation cost. You can then do this as many times as you want, keeping 1 mana floating every time for infinite mana of any color you choose. Use that mana to cast as many big creatures as you want, bouncing and destroying the rest of the board, and finish out by casting Tendrils of Agony. As long as you still have a counterspell in your yard or your hand, this drains your opponents out on the spot with protection. There are a couple other ways to use this infinite mana to win if you happen to get a lucky draw, or you manage to mill most of your library. Sir Conrad's ability can make every player mill out and take damage every time, as long as you can float black mana with the Cloud of Fairies combo. Ancient One requires that you untap Dimir Aqueduct with the Cloud of Fairies, but if you do, you can mill your opponents out of the game by discarding a bunch of your 6 and 7 drop monsters. Okay, we're aware that casting a ton of big beefy creatures is fun and enriching for everyone, and everyone should do it, but that also comes at the price of a slower tempo. Because we aren't in green or white, that means that we'll need some help keeping up with our enemies' boards so that we don't get overrun by turn 5. Dying to Serve and Cryptcaller Chariot from the new Aetherdrift set will make a 2/2 body every time you discard something. Emmet does that. Whoa, what a coincidence. This gives you, at minimum, 1 chump blocker per round to stave off on-board threats until you get a giant fish or a big demon out of the yard and swinging. Speaking of demons, Overseer of the Damned is a great choice if you're looking for what to reanimate first. As it enters, it kills something and makes you a 2/2 zombie, then it makes another one every time an opponent's creature dies. Tormod the Desecrator is another constant source of zombies in this deck, especially once Emmet flips into his evil Hades demon form and starts exiling things from your graveyard. There is a small chance that you actually go wide enough with zombies to close out a game, but really this deck has a pretty tough time getting a steady board established, so if people are scared of you, just chump block with them. Plus, they're kinda cute if you think about it. Kinda like the Cubus. Everyone loves the Cubus. Protection and blink. Like any good blue deck, we have a bunch of ways to make sure that nobody pulls ahead of us with spells that affect the stack. Negate is great against removal or disrupting a win, and Circular Logic should be a hard counter almost every time you cast it since we are designed to fill our own graveyard. We also have a pile of fun spells that protect our commander as well as flipping him back around if you ever need his discard outlet again, or you want to mill a bunch of cards without exiling them. Essence Flux, Planar Incision, and Blur all blink Emet Selch and give you a slight upside. If someone tries to zap your commander or you find yourself exiling your graveyard faster than you can fill it, these are a perfect tool. Ghostly Flicker accomplishes the same thing and can also untap a land to make sure you have that mana up during the next opponent's turn. It also goes mana positive if you happen to have one of those lands out that taps for more than 1 mana. Deadeye Navigator is here to make sure that Hades doesn't exile our whole grave and also sneak in a combo with Cloud of Fairies. Another sneaky way that Emet Selch can use these spells is by casting our big mill spells from the graveyard without exiling a huge chunk of your library. Let's say that you have your commander on its backside and you mill a tasty Cut Your Losses along with an Essence Flux. You can cast Cut Your Losses and hold priority to cast Essence Flux on top of it, targeting Hades. The Blink spell resolves first, turning Hades back into Emet Selch, and then when Cut Your Losses resolves, Hades' static ability won't be around to exile your entire library. -1 or 2, hopefully. As long as you aren't in a rush, you can wait till your next upkeep to flip Emet Selch back into Hades and win with any line you choose from your graveyard after that. Much of our removal package requires a reanimation spell or 5 or more mana. This is the thing about playing Dimir creatures. Your slice of the color pie says, "Is this little goblin bothering you, miss?" He's not. He's just sitting there minding his business. Well, I gotta punch something to death today. I don't care if it's bad politicking or whatever at the table. I'm gonna get you focused, okay, ma'am? Vile Mutilator, Noxious Gearhulk, and Archfiend of Ifnir, also known as the first, second, and third Dooms, all wipe out the opponent's board so that only your big fatties get to stick around. If you ever need a board wipe that isn't attached to a body, Terror Tide should take care of any big go-wide board as long as you've been milling like you're supposed to. Hullbreaker Horror is the last big guy that acts like a living snap or remand as long as he sticks around. In the early game, when you can't count on reanimating or spending 5 mana, we've got the classic Infernal Grasp and Lagoon Breach to snipe anyone who's ruining your day. Playing a sorcery that exiles your big whale rather than putting it in the graveyard isn't exactly ideal, but it can still feel threatening later in the game. Draw. Most of our draw effects in this list appropriately also help us fill the graveyard. Chart a Course, Frantic Search, and Thirst for Discovery will each let you choose whether or not you want to discard some meaningful reanimate targets or not. Frantic Search can also let you gain extra mana if you happen to run across High Tide or a 2-mana land as well. Fact or Fiction and Hostile Negotiations will both effectively let you mill 2 or 3, as well as drawing cards. The rest of this section are good setup cards for when your centuries-long scheme is finally set into motion. Harvester of Souls draws you a card whenever any creature card finds its fate. As a 5/5 with Death Touch, he's pretty good at chunking your opponent's life totals down too. Secrets of the Dead helps the backside of our commander replace everything that might get exiled from the graveyard when we cast it. Rush of Knowledge is also the perfect draw spell for our plan of reanimating huge bodies. 5 mana to draw 3? Ew. Gross. What are you doing here? I don't even know you. 5 mana to draw 7? Yeah! Give it to me. That's more like it.
Nails, hair, hips, heels, ass, fat, lips, real, purse, full, big bills, bitch, I'm a big deal. Legs, face, eyes, thin waist, thick thighs. You, me, you, wish, new phone, who, this, pussy, puss, give 'em cunt, bitch.
Since Dimir doesn't have access to regular ramp spells, some of our mana is actually cost reduction. It ain't easy being not green, you know? Gravebreaker Lamia lets us cast from our graveyard at a slight discount, in addition to being good setup for reanimating the specific creature you need in any given moment. Deranged Assistant and Millikin are both mana dorks that only tap for colorless, but they also mill you while they do it, which definitely makes up for it. Scare Tiller is the closest we get to a green ramp effect, since it lets us play 2 lands in 1 turn. The really helpful part about running this guy, though, is the ability to get back any lands that we dump into the graveyard. I've played my fair share of mill decks, and it is so frustrating when your deck is stacked in a way that leads you to missing land drops because you're just ditching them all and drawing nothing but gas. Not very many cards outside of green actually let you pull lands out of your graveyard, so this Scarecrow is definitely your best pal. Dowsing Dagger and Matsalanchi, the Great Door, both flip into lands that produce more than 1 mana, so as far as we're concerned, they are ramp cards. One of these requires Delirium, which should be easy enough since we get to choose what we discard earlier in the game, and the other requires us to connect to an opponent. Dowsing Dagger should let you get in on someone's good side enough to poke somebody else with your commander, if you want. The other 2 members of this group are actually land cycling cards from the Lord of the Rings set. Troll of Khazad-dûm is a pretty good reanimation target in a budget deck, as long as you're fine winning the game with combat damage. And drawing 3 cards later in the game with Hades is never a bad thing either. Our utility lands in this list include everything with a mill or discard effect that I could reasonably justify buying. Gaia Reach Sanitarium and Spymaster's Vault both let us discard really big critters for reanimating. The Vault feels especially good if you leave up that black mana and use it as a response to a board wipe. I've seen that do pretty crazy things. The lands that let us mill are Nephalia Drownyard, Port of Carfel, Restless Reef, and Tomb Fortress. The Port and the Necron 40k tomb from the distant future both let us reanimate something if we have nothing else to do late in the game as well. Our other interesting lands are the ones that let us combo with Cloud of Fairies and High Tide. Arid Archway, Coral Atoll, Demir Aqueduct, Everglades, and Guildless Commons all produce 2 mana, and all require you to bounce a land back to your hand when you play them. The earlier you draw these in the game, the better. The main downside to these is that they potentially slow down your turns by a lot if you draw too many of them. If you only have tapped lands to bounce and replay, it really slows the game down a lot and feels frustrating, so be careful how you mulligan. Inundated Archive, the backside of Waterlogged Teachings, is another card that can smooth out your mana base as long as you aren't in a position to tutor up a Hullbreaker Hoarder or Tainted Strike for a win. It is kind of a land that counts as a sorcery as well, so that helps a lot with the Candlekeep Inspiration win con as well. If this deck inspired you to do some cool graveyard stuff, then welcome to the dark side. We have a $5 suggested donation over at patreon.com/mtgratgirl, or you could just leave a like if you feel like it. These cool people on screen have donated, and they get an extra video every month too. Alternatively, you could just go to my Etsy shop and buy a pack of tokens or some stickers if you'd like. That is at etsy.com/shop/doodlesbycass. I think Emet Selch is a really interesting version of this self-mill effect. If you have similar ideas or you see a line that I haven't discussed, I would love to see it in the comments. I'm sure that I'll eventually see somebody milling themselves as fast as possible and winning with Thassa's Oracle or Jace or something. But, you know, I like to keep these lists $100-ish so that you can go out and try them for yourself. Thanks for watching until the end. I'll see you on the other side, my warrior of light.
Pussy puss puss, give him cunt, bitch. Mama, yes, dog, then you pop that tongue, bitch. This whole club is my runway, run, bitch. Y'all 5, 4, 3, 2s, I'm a 1, bitch. Girl, what did that girl just say, girl? Girl, I don't dance, I work. I don't play, I slay. I don't walk, I strut, and then sashay. But I don't work for free. That's not the T, hunty. So make it rain on me, and I might let you see. What you gonna let them see? My nails, hair, hips, heels, nails, hair, hips, heels, nails, hair, hips, heels, nails, hair, hips, heels.
My nails, hair, hips, heels, nails, hair, hips, heels, nails, hair, hips, heels, nails, hair, hips, heels.
What are you still doing here, huh?